Go.
All right, welcome to another show of Wealth Builders. My name's Anthony Cangemi, and I have our fabulous co-host with us this morning, as we do every Sunday morning, Mr. Tony Shore. We are now in full launch of our new name and show credentials, Wealth Builders. The show is about accumulation, tax advantaged distribution, and leveraging and transferring wealth from one generation to the next. So we appreciate you joining us this morning, and we have a great show for you this morning. But before we get into it, Tony, thank you so much for joining us. And how are you doing this morning?
Well, I'm doing good. We're recording this show. It doesn't air until Sunday, but we record it right after the Super Bowl. So last night was the Super Bowl. That was interesting, wasn't it?
It really was. We boiled some crawfish. I had some friends
Oh,
over. We had a good time. I wish the game would have been a little better. I wasn't expecting Philly to, really. I mean, we were expecting a really good game, so it didn't
right.
work out as well for Kansas
Kansas City.
City,
Yeah.
but nevertheless, we had a good time. I know the quarter was packed. I think New Orleans as a whole, the city really was a a fabulous host city. I think everything went off really well here in our city, and so all in all, I think it was a good event.
Yeah, the NFL was broadcasting from down there in the French Quarter the whole day. There were activities, the film crews, the NFL people were down there, and it looked like it was a blast. And I think the city looked great, and
Yeah.
they had good security there. I always get a kick out of the celebrities at the game. At one point, at the beginning of the game, in one of the executive boxes was Paul McCartney talking to Adam Sandler. So you see things like that. It's like, what are Adam Sandler and Paul McCartney talking about? That's always funny. And the president was there, and of course Taylor Swift was there. She runs the NFL now, I guess. I don't know, but she was there. And
Now, I wasn't sure about the halftime show. Like these are, but I mean, even
well, you and
my
I are
young
too
kids.
old to, yeah.
Well, but I mean, I got 21 and 22-year-old, 24, 22, and they really weren't familiar with the fella. So I think it might
Oh,
even be younger than that.
yeah, no, my youngest is very familiar and a fan, but even she watched it with us, and she's 20. She watched it with us, and Kendrick Lamar is considered one of the greatest hip hop artists,
Okay.
but he just, there were no musicians, no instruments. It was just rapping to tracks. And so I can't comment because that's not my genre, and
Right.
I don't listen to that kind of music. So I don't know whether it was good or bad. Some people loved it. A lot of people did not. So
Right.
I thought that was interesting.
Right.
I always like it. Of course, I like it when there's a rock artist or something. But I think the greatest halftime performer of all time was Prince when he sang Purple Rain in the pouring rain at the Half Bowl Super Time Bowl. Remember that when it was just
Yes,
pouring
I
rain and
remember
Prince is up
that.
there singing
Yeah.
Purple Rain and it's pouring rain. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't, I mean, and
You
then he
can't
ripped,
get any better than that.
no, and he ripped a great guitar solo. It was, I think that's the bar, and it's set pretty high. But yeah, there were some disappointments, but overall, I thought it went well, unless you're a Chiefs fan. I was,
Yeah.
but it wasn't as great a game. I thought Saquon Barkley would break a few big plays. He did not. I thought Mahomes would pull off some huge plays that we'd be able to really would be amazing. And there was one long pass that was good, but otherwise, the Eagles just dominated. So
They really did. I mean, they just didn't show up,
yeah,
like they had been, and I
yeah,
guess it was just an off night.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, probably. Well, let's jump into our topic. I know we started this a couple of weeks ago on the last new episode we did, and we're talking about estate planning. And I know part of Wealth Builders and the new show title and the new direction is to cover, the foundation, accumulation, distribution, and transfer, and estate
Correct.
planning would probably be on the latter side of that, the transfer of wealth. And
Correct.
so there are a lot of mistakes people can make when planning their estate or transferring their wealth to loved ones, aren't there?
Well, there really is, Tony. And, a lot of these things we'll be talking about this morning, they're really not complicated. They're not complicated to get set up. But if you don't have an estate plan, or not having an estate plan, or failing to create an estate plan, can really then become a pretty complicated situation, because things aren't spelled out the way they could have been, to make for an easy transition from one, person to the next, or one generation to the next. So estate planning and just having a well documented plan is really the first and foremost of importance.
Yeah, and I think that is important, having a plan. That's where you start. The biggest mistake people can make is to not have an estate plan or a plan in place on what happens after you pass. It's not just, some people think, well, I don't need an estate plan or a plan for this because, I'm not a multi-millionaire or whatever, what have you. But it doesn't matter how much or how little you have. If you have a lot, people think, oh, it'll get taken care of. If you have a little, people think they don't need it. But everybody needs a plan, right?
Absolutely. And we often talk about how assets transfer, and primarily, Tony, the two ways that your assets can transfer from one person to the next is either through your will, your last will and testament, either through your will or through beneficiary designations. So things like your retirement accounts, annuities, life insurance, any types of retirement plans that have designated beneficiaries. Of course, those assets go directly to those beneficiaries. And then assets that don't have a designated beneficiary, of course, go through your will. So these are the two primary ways that assets will leave your name and go through your estate and go to the next folks in line. The key there is making sure that those beneficiary designations and those beneficiary forms are set up properly, and making sure that your will is current and accurate. But frankly, if those two pieces are in place, you're already, 85% of the way there. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many beneficiary forms we have to take care of,
Sure.
update. And so it's really important to make sure that these documents are done correctly.
Oh, for sure. And you want to make sure you're working alongside your financial planner and an estate planning attorney. And I know you've had the estate planning attorneys that you work with. We've had some on the air as guests, and you work closely with estate planning attorneys to help your clients and that can help our listeners out there. You have to have a plan in place. In you every if state is different, every person's situation is different, so you need to work with a trusted professional and have a team, and that's what you do there. I know at Crescent City you have a great team, and you work with all aspects of wealth building, including the transfer. Now, having a plan, that's step one. What's the second thing we need to be aware of?
Yeah, not updating the estate plan when there are changes. And let me just say, as you mentioned, we have an estate planning attorney we work closely with and other professionals. And I would say that making sure that everyone is aligned and collaborating is so important. It's the old adage, sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing.
Right.
And that in this instance, it's really important that everybody is on the same page. But not updating your estate plan, failing to review and update your plan after a major life change or life event, such as a marriage, uh, you know, divorce, a birth of a child or a grandchild. These are all just simply examples of a major life change. And so, if any of these events take place, you want to make sure that your estate plan is updated. So, not updating your estate plan, especially when there is a major life change, is really, it can't be overstated, Tony.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the importance of this it's just huge. And I've seen it, Anthony, when my grandfather passed, my grandpa Bob, he lived to 101, as I've mentioned on the show before, and he
Yeah.
was active through age 100. But when he did finally pass, he's 100% English guy and very stoic in certain senses, didn't talk about things like money, didn't
Hmm.
discuss that.
Right.
And so when he passed, he had a will and he had updated his will, but he did not work with he didn't work with an estate planning attorney or a financial advisor. And there were mistakes made, and it is so critical, and it can cause family disharmony. You don't want to drive your family apart just because you didn't have your wishes in order or your plan up to date. So what's another mistake we should avoid with this?
Yeah, that's so true, Tony. What you just mentioned, and then the disharmony.
Yeah.
I don't know what the percentage is, but I would imagine it's higher than we might think. That uh, the disharmony that comes about in people's families when someone passes away because people don't feel like they were treated fairly, or um, you know, they, there's a lot of sometimes there's some, you know, tension or um, within the family. They don't think that the other siblings or family members acted accordingly, and
Yeah.
and so really it can create a lot of tension and a lot of disharmony in a family. So having a really organized and well thought out estate plan really just goes a long way for just where families can just maintain their love and peace for each other. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really something that happens, I think more times than we might think. And
Yeah.
so making sure that that's not the case is so important. Number three, choosing the wrong executor. And so selecting someone who is unqualified or unwilling to take care of that role as executor or executrix, depending on if it's a male or female. So, executor is the person that is named in the will that's going to help the attorney, the estate planning attorney, gather up the information that they're going to need to do the succession. So things like bank statements and account statements, titling of maybe the home, or maybe tax papers that were generated. So the executor is going to be the person that's going to work closely with the attorney to gather the information so the attorney can do a good job with the succession and the estate plan. So a very, very important person in the process. And the point here is selecting the right person. So someone who is qualified, who understands, uh, you know, titling and tax, someone that's got some type of accounting or financial type of background, somebody that's qualified and somebody that's willing to take that role on. So choosing the right executor, executrix is really a very important part of your overall estate plan.
Yeah. Yeah, again, yeah, or something you really want to avoid is not having all these ducks in a row, choosing the wrong executor. That was another aspect of my grandfather's situation that wasn't good. He had put his youngest son in
Mm,
charge, and the youngest son had talked to the attorney and to the grandfather, but nobody had talked to the other three siblings.
yeah,
And there were things that got missed, like who gets the truck. My dad was under the impression he got it.
right,
His brother was under the impression he got it. So then
right,
after my grandfather passed, since it wasn't clearly delineated in the will,
right,
and there were no trusts set up, so that would have helped things too. But
right.
you got to think of these things. What's something else that maybe we're not thinking about that we should know when it comes to our estate plans or our legacy?
Yeah, the number 4 is a big one, and boy, I tell you, we run into this one all the time. Not planning for an incapacity. So you become incapacitated, and you're failed to designate a durable power of attorney for your health care or financial directives to be able to manage your affairs if you become incapacitated. So all of a sudden you're, in a health situation and you're not able to care for yourself, or maybe a son or a daughter or a loved one is involved and they're trying to, uh, bring on some additional health care needs, maybe home health or that sort of thing, or communicate with medical professionals or communicate with financial institutions. If they don't have your durable power of attorney to handle your medical and financial directives, you've literally handicapped that person. And so, not having a power of attorney set up and a co-power of attorney in case that power of attorney can't perform the functions. But if you don't have a power of attorney for your medical and financial directives, and you become incapacitated, it really creates, I often say, and I mean, I know it's more than a $5 document, but really it's not expensive to have a durable
No.
power of attorney. But if you don't have it and you're in a situation where you need other people to act in your stead and they don't have it, it can create so much trouble and so many problems. And so
Yeah.
it's an estate planning document. It's easy to get, but if you don't have it in place, it can be a real problem.
Yeah, and those powers of attorney, like you say, they're fairly straightforward. They're easy to get. They're not that expensive.
Yeah.
You really need to do them because, I've run into it. My mom has late stage Parkinson's. My dad has Parkinson's. So, I have financial and medical power of attorney,
Hmm.
durable full power of attorney because and it's a good thing I do with my dad. I've needed it. So um you got to
Yeah.
have that stuff in place, and a lot of people just don't like to think about those possibilities, but as people live longer and longer, you need those things, and more so than ever. So not planning for incapacity is or not getting those powers of attorney, that's a big one.
It is.
A big one. What's another estate planning mistake we should avoid?
Not considering taxes, overlooking potential income tax, estate taxes, all sorts of taxes that can come about when someone passes away. Um, Accounts are titled differently. We often say when we're doing our financial overviews, what's real important is how things are titled and how things are taxed. And so, for assets that would get a step up in cost basis, have to be titled a certain way, but they get a step up. That can be a very tax friendly way to pass assets on. Pre tax dollars like IRAs and 401ks, of course, that has some strings attached, and there's taxes that have to be paid there. Income taxes, state taxes, of course, the estate exemption is pretty high right now, but that's also something to keep an eye on. So just in general, Tony, number 5 on the list, not considering taxes. So when you think about estate planning and you think about how assets are going to pass on or transfer, the question is, what is the tax implication? And have we done all we can do to transfer these assets in the most tax efficient way?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. Obviously, taxes always play a part. It seems in everything we
Yes.
talk about on the show, Anthony. Every week, taxes comes into it, and that's because it affects our finances and our financial planning so much, especially when we're talking about retirement planning. But you're right. Estate taxes, yikes! You know, I'm from the state of Minnesota, and estate taxes and things like that, capital gains and estate taxes are really bad here in the state of Minnesota, and it varies from state to state, right? So
Yes.
yeah, and so you need to consider all the potential estate taxes that are out there. You don't want to overlook that. What's next? What's something else we need to look out for?
Number 6, forgetting about those digital assets. So that's something that, as we march along in time, we have digital property, we have social media profiles. And so what can happen is, passwords. How many times do we try to coach our clients into making sure that all of their passwords and their digital assets are all safe and secure and also accessible to their family, their loved ones, when and if
Yeah,
something were to happen to them. So,
sure.
this is something that, has evolved. I mean, I don't think we were talking about, digital assets even 10 years ago. The,
Probably
the
not. No.
the way that how important it is today, but just
Yeah.
online accounts
Sure.
and all of the rest of it, Tony, has to be well guarded, but well documented,
Sure.
so the family can access those accounts when and if needed.
Yeah. Very good. All right, let's move along so we can get all 10 of these in here. What's next? What's number 7?
Not providing clear instruction, vague or general instructions about distribution of assets can lead to family conflicts, disharmony, and then even worse, legal battles. So, not providing clear instruction. At the end of the day, Tony, if your will and your beneficiary designations, and then even a trust, if you need to set things up to where you want to have a little more control about how assets are passed on. If it's well documented, it's very clear and concise. It's been updated along the way. If there was any type of, life change, and it's a clear, concise, and well documented estate plan, then there really should not be any uh, disharmony or conflict. But unfortunately, more times than not, there is disharmony, there is
Yeah.
conflict. It was not that long ago, I was talking to some kids of a client of mine who is he's more, he's in a situation where he's got the 2 boys, and the client is under the impression that both sons receive the home and get use of the home together if and when something happens to them. And then after our attorney reviewing the will that they had done years ago, it doesn't state any of that. So a lot of times what
Mhm.
happens is the client or the person that's that we're talking through the estate plan with, their idea about how they want things to go just isn't the way the documents state that things are going to go. In this case, it was a pretty old will. It was back
Yeah.
20 years ago. So reviewing those documents and making sure there's clear instruction is just critical.
Yeah. What's the next one?
Not coordinating beneficiaries, having different beneficiaries listed on accounts and in your will can create confusion, potentially leaving your assets in legal limbo. So, coordinating those beneficiaries, making sure that the accounts that you want to go to this group of beneficiaries are very in sync and organized, and your will should align with your beneficiary designation. So really it's the coordination, if you will, of the will and the beneficiary designations that shouldn't be, there shouldn't be any conflict or
Sure.
they should be very well coordinated amongst each other.
Yeah, and make sure they're correct and that you have the correct beneficiaries, as you mentioned earlier. Well, that's a good one. Okay, we just have two left. What's number 9?
Failing to consider special needs. So this is something that we run into again more times than we'd like is having to address a special needs situation. You can have special needs child, grandchild, or someone in the family that is receiving benefits from the state or the federal government. And if they receive too much, they could jeopardize their benefits. So having these special needs trusts set up for any special needs child, grandchild, or any beneficiary that you may have that has special needs that you want to leave assets to, it's so important to have the trust set up to where the assets go to the trust for their care, for their support. But the way these trusts are drawn up, it keeps those assets from jeopardizing or affecting any of the benefits that they're already receiving. So
Yeah.
these special needs trusts are really a godsend for
Yeah.
families that are in that situation.
Yeah, and speaking of that, number 10, that's trust, right? And we've already that's come up a few times, but that's important too. What's number 10?
So, ignoring trust in general, overlooking the use of trust to protect assets and avoid succession or probate or unnecessary delays or costs. So, there are many, many different types of trusts. And as our attorney last week talked about, it's not a blanket, everybody needs a trust. But in some situations where, especially if people have specific instructions on how they want to pass assets on. Maybe they want certain structure to that. So much, the person gets so much at a certain point in their life, or maybe it's a minor beneficiary. Maybe they're setting up something for the grandkids, for a college fund. So there's many, many different types of trusts. We just talked a little bit about a special needs trust. There's so many different types of trusts. But
Yeah.
if you have a specific requests on how you want assets to go and have more structure involved, then trusts certainly are a magnificent tool for overall estate planning.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. Well, Anthony, great show today. We ran out of time, but we got all 10 estate planning mistakes to avoid and some great information for our listeners out there. But if they want to meet with an estate planning attorney and get a financial plan in place as well, how can they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So just pick up the phone and call us at 504-828-2171 or visit us online at crescentcityretirement.com. We just strongly believe that there's 5 key pillars to any sound retirement plan, and that would be estate and legacy planning, healthcare planning, an investment strategy, income planning, and then, of course, taxes. And as you mentioned earlier, Tony, taxes really infiltrate all aspects of a full holistic retirement plan. So we just encourage our listeners to give us a call or visit us online at crescentcityretirement.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anthony, and listeners and viewers. Thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of Wealth Builders with our host, Anthony Cangemi.